Hello, everyone. My name is Mehak Shahzad, and I'm a fourth-year psychology major. I was working on this project with my PI, Dr. Rachel Wu, and the title of my presentation is Emotional Regulation and Well-Being Across the Lifespan and During the Pandemic. So just to give you guys a little bit of background and context about my research, I will be starting off with some definitions. So first of all, what is emotional regulation? Emotional regulation is the ability to use strategies to moderate the emotional state. And we have different types of emotional regulation strategies. Some are positive, such as positive reappraisal and planning. And some are negative, such as rumination, catastrophizing, self-blame, and such. Then we have well-being, which can be defined as the presence of positive indicators such as life satisfaction, high self-esteem, happiness, or it could also be defined as the absence of negative indicators. In the literature, we have seen that there is a link between positive emotional regulation strategies and higher levels of well-being. And this relationship also applies in the other direction, where using negative emotional strategies such as rumination is linked to lower levels of well-being. So looking at emotional regulation and well-being during in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, when well-being was negatively affected, we saw that in the literature, it was seen that people with stronger emotional regulation skills were able to have higher levels of well-being than people who had poor regulation skills. In regards to the literature, there are also mixed results if age is a factor in emotional regulation. And just to touch upon this topic a bit more, in the literature, there are some studies that say that age is a moderator for emotional regulation, such as older adults have better emotional regulation than young adults. And then we also have other papers on the other side that say adolescents have better regulation than other age populations, such as older adults. We also have some papers that claim age only matters for certain strategies of regulation. Some of the strategies could include situation selection. Age only makes a difference in regards to what situations we choose to put ourselves in, or age only differs for cognitive change tasks, which is where we look at a situation in a different way. So age makes a difference in regards to that. But then we also have some papers that say age makes no difference, and no matter what age you are, all age ranges have equal capabilities in regards to emotional regulation. So some gaps in the literature that we will be looking at is age a moderator for emotional regulation? And then which age population was most at risk during the pandemic? Because it was a hard time for us all, but was there a certain population that was more at risk and more vulnerable during the pandemic than the other? And so our current study is attempting to identify which age population was most vulnerable in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic within the Inland Empire. So our research question is, does age influence emotional regulation and well-being? And our hypothesis is that older adults will have higher emotional regulation abilities and well-being measures compared to younger adults. So our participants were given an online Qualtrics survey, which they were given annually, and for the years of 2020, 2021, and 2022. This survey was only given out to residents of the Inland Empire, and the way we verified this was by asking for their zip codes to verify they lived within the Inland Empire. This was a very comprehensive survey that was given out. There were more than 200 questions on there, including a lot of demographic questions. And there were also a lot of outcome measures, like over 100 outcome measures that were asked. In regards to the participants for wave 1 and 2, attrition occurred from wave 1, 2020 to wave 2, 2021. And attrition is basically a decrease in the number of participants, which tends to happen in longitudinal studies. So we divided our participants into 3 age categories, which included young adults, which we classified from 18 to 39-year-olds, middle-aged adults, which were from 40 to 59-year-olds, and older adults who were from 60 to 89-year-olds. And the reason we classified our age populations this way is because this is how the US Census Bureau classifies it when they collect the census. So some of the demographic questions we gave include sex, race, and ethnicity. We saw that 75% of our respondents were female, whereas only 24% were male, and so on. In regards to our methods, this is a data analysis study. So we were analyzing the data we collected from Wave 1, 2022, and Wave 2, 2021. The measures we used were DIRS, which stands for Difficulty in Emotional Regulation, and PERMA, which is a measure of well-being. So here, just to give you some examples of DIRS, here are some questions, such as, I am confused about how I feel. When I am upset, I have difficulty getting work done. So participants would look at these questions and give a rating from 1, almost never, to 10, almost always. And for the PERMA, some of the questions were, in general, how often do you feel joyful? In general, how often do you feel anxious? And they gave a response from 1 to 10. So for our analysis plan, we did a 3x2 MANOVA. So our independent variable was age, and there were 3 levels of age. There were the different age groups: young adults, middle adults, and older adults. And then we had 2 outcome measures, which were our dependent variable, which were DIRS and PERMA. And we conducted a MANOVA analysis to identify if there was a relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. This was then followed by a 2-key test, which was to establish a relationship between the different age groups. And lastly, we conducted a linear regression model to look at each age group across time for each measure. So what we found was that age was significant for DIRS and PERMA in both time points. So this just means that age did make a difference in regards to the regulation and the well-being for both Wave 1 and Wave 2. In our 2-key test, we found that older adults had higher DIRS and lower PERMA scores. So if you look at this graph over here, on the x-axis is age groups. This over here is young adults, middle-aged adults, and older adults. And on our y-axis is our dependent variable, DIRS. There were 16 DIRS questions asked, and we just took this average. We summed up all the questions and found the average. And same for PERMA. This is the age group on the x-axis. And for PERMA, we also found the average of the PERMA questions. And so we found that generally from Wave 1 and 2, young adults had the higher DIRS scores seen here. And also in Wave 2, they were also still the highest. And then we also found that for our PERMA, older adults had higher PERMA scores generally than the other age groups. In our regression model, we also found that time points did predict the DIRS and PERMA, and this was seen with an average of 11 unit increase for DIRS and PERMA for DIRS scores between time point 1 and 2. So there, as you can see from this chart, there was a sudden increase for Wave 2, which was during 2021. So from 2020 to 2021, the difficulty in emotional regulation scores had an increase of like 11 units. And then for PERMA, there was just a slight decrease of like 0.36 units. We also found that age was not a predictor for our regression model. So what does all of this mean? Well, what we found was that our hypothesis was supported and age was associated with better emotional regulation and well-being. We found that the population that was most vulnerable during the COVID-19 pandemic was younger adults because they reported the lowest regulation and well-being scores compared to the other age groups. And then we also found that middle-aged adults had no significant difference, so they were stable throughout the study. So what are some outcomes and future actions? Well, from what we know, we now know which age group needs support after the pandemic. We know that young adults need more support after the pandemic rather than focusing our support on older adults. So through this, we can try to decrease the barriers and increase access to mental health resources for young adults. This study can also be used to inform future interventions and programs. And it also supports the argument in the existing literature that states age is a moderator for emotional regulation. What we currently need to do is analyze the third time point of 2022 to see if the trends we found in the present study still continue into the third time point. And we could also use different measures of well-being and emotional regulation, because in this comprehensive survey that was given, we had multiple different measures that measured well-being, and we also had other measures that measured emotional regulation. So maybe if we use different measures, would we still see the same outcome? And I just want to thank my PI, Rachel Wu, our collaborator, Liz Davis, and the grad student who helped me out, Leia Ferguson. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation.